As some of you will know, I recently did a video talking about Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and one of the more frequent themes in the comments from people who didn't like the game but did like the story was that as a game it was just a bit too much of a passive experience. I enjoyed the game myself, but I can see it. I don't think it's uncommon to see a game that would work better as a different kind of media. I think Everybody's Gone to the Rapture could have worked just as well as a film or a TV series. I think Martha is Dead or The Suicide of Rachel Foster could have had a fighting chance as a book. Dead by Daylight Cock and Ball Torture would be a bestseller. Not only are there lots of different ways to tell a story, but there are lots of different ways to portray a perspective more than just, is it first person or is it third person? Is your character passively watching a series of events unfold, like in Everybody's Gone to the Rapture? Or are they actively involved, like in, well, most games? I don't know, Crash Bandicoot Warped. Is your character telling the whole truth? Are they lying on purpose? Or do they just not quite understand the bigger picture? These comments gave me a lot to think about in between banning all the people who call me a fat cow for whatever reason they can think of, and after some ruminating and a small cry in the shower, one game did occur to me as the perfect example of a story that, in any other medium of storytelling, would have collapsed under itself like a toddler on a stack of magazines. And that game is Raid Shadow Legends. As the greatest mobile game of all time, there really is no question on whether this succulent piece of mobile media could ever be anything but. Based in the beautiful fictional world of Teleria with over 600 champions to choose from, you can smack down a shocking variety of bosses in an enormous selection of dungeons, or PvP with opposing teams for juicy rewards. Since I once got a comment claiming I sound like the High Elf from Skyrim, and I've internalized that trauma forever, I decided to own my overt Britishness and grab the High Elf class as soon as I hopped on the game. I can be cool, I thought. I can be British and cool. Turns out that the elves in Raid Shadow Legends are much cooler than me, which is something I'm sure I'll adjust to with decades of therapy. The classic ancient civilization, the elves in Raid Shadow Legends serve as wardens for their comparatively infant fellow races. They nurtured the human race in their first steps into civilization, defeated the orcs that stormed the continent, and survived the fall of the Lizardman Empire. Sure, a minor schism with the Dark Elves ended up drowning the country in war, but let's let bygones be bygones. Raid's autoplay mechanic is absolutely ideal if you're playing this in between working or hopping around the house. You can set your team to automatically redo a battle non-stop until they hit max level, which is great if you have a new character you want to power level, i.e. the new High Elves, maybe. The game has incredible quality of life, and you know I am a sucker for some good UX, including, for example, some simple gear upgrade systems. You can flat out just press a button to upgrade your gear to a desired level rather than ponderously picking through upgrade levels. This month, Raid has a non-stop schedule of special events and activities, including Season 3 of the Forge Pass, which brings us a limited edition artifact set. If that doesn't tickle your pickle, Raid is also releasing some new champions with some awesome champion skins for the incredible Madame Ceres. But that's not all. Later this month, Raid is giving everyone's favourite champion some much needed love and appreciation in the form of an upgrade. Death Knight is becoming a legendary champion. So this is the best time to get started in Raid Shadow Legends, and if you click the link in the description below or scan my QR code here on screen, you'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We have a free epic champion, Rector Draft, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you land in the game. These rewards are only available for the next 30 days, so make sure you click that link in my description so that you don't miss them. With that, let's get back to the video. Thank you so much Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Sorry, what? Where was I? Oh yes, SOMA. Just a pre-warning, this is going to be a deep dive with comparisons to other media. If you expect gameplay, this is not going to be the video for you, and if you're one of those people that always comes in and asks why I'm talking a lot about a game I like rather than just playing it, you'll probably dislike this video too. I genuinely implore you to move on, find a sunny spot outside, pick your nose for a bit, go on, get out. SOMA is, in the loosest sense of the word, survival horror, but take that description with a heaping pile of salt. Released in 2015, SOMA was developed by Frictional Games, creators of the Amnesia series, and arguably the company who brought the format of creeping around a dark scary place with a small light source hiding from unkillable evil enemies and solving simple puzzles into the mainstream. Amnesia was the catalyst for bringing Let's Plays into their forefront of popularity, catapulting the likes of PewDiePie and Markiplier into superstardom. Scare compilations and blind reactions filtered in alongside, and thus YouTube gaming really took off. Back in the days where video clicks were all that mattered, not watch time, so YouTubers would make their thumbnails look like softcore porn so people would click it before angrily clicking away when they realised they weren't going to get to watch watch two dead-eyed straight porn stars pretend to be lesbians together. Blueballed again by a StarCraft Let's Play in disguise, for shame. They also made Penumbra, which is great, but the enemy has this big weird pepperami penis that catches you off guard, so you constantly stop while running to look back and do a funny upset laugh at its absurdity. I think it's supposed to be an umbilical cord or something, but frankly we were not living in an era of gaming graphics where that would be horribly obvious without looking very closely. And why would you be looking very closely if you can't tell whether or not it's a penis? SOMA wasn't their biggest project, probably because of the format Frictional had become known for. You can tell that they wrote the story and created an experience that they were so proud of and really cared about, only for a higher up to walk over to their desk and ask them when they were going to code the monster in. Thus, the team added some walking nests of Christmas lights that scream at you when they see you, and some random robot woman in her pants, and a man with black pudding for a face, but it's such a peripheral piece of storytelling that you can literally turn their aggression off in the difficulty options, so instead they just follow you around like a sad lost puppy that whinges a lot in garbled, tortured English. I won't even be talking about it in this video, it's just so weirdly irrelevant. And if you ever play this, I recommend you play it on story mode and experience it without the monsters snapping at your heels every few minutes. This 100% is a story-driven game with puzzle elements, taking you through one of the most memorable dark stories in gaming, and you don't need to be trailed after like an exhausted parent. The monsters can be a boring pain in the arse, so turn them off and let them die. So, in SOMA, you play as Simon. Simon's had a car accident, and consequently, his brain is actually on the fritz quite a bit. There's some damage, and it seems to be quite critical. Running out of tenable options for reducing the harm, he agrees to embark on some experimental brain scan led by a man called Munchie. The concept of this new treatment is extremely interesting. So Munchie would take a single brain scan of you, and then be able to run that brain scan through loads of different simulations. It would simulate you taking a multitude of different medications, different therapies, diets, and exercise approaches. Think of it like the infinite parallel universe theory. There are millions of the same brain, all undergoing slightly different treatment. Munchie would keep an eye on the simulations to see which of them would actually cause the brain to repair, and then you would be able to use that specific treatment to cure yourself. It basically prevents you from having to trial so many different things when a computer program can trial it instead in a second and just hand you the solution. That means there's no guesswork, no experimentation, no wasted time, no risk, just healing. Munchie is a graduate student, which is hardly the most reassuring thing to hear, and he performs your brain scan in a creepy empty building, which also should have been a reason to turn on your heels, but Simon's probably working on a stunted capacity after the knock to his noggin, and he walks right in. And look, there's a picture of you in here too. You can have that joke if you like. Next time you play with a friend, help yourself. Simon meets Munchie, sits down for his scan, there's a bright flash, and...
Hello? Mr. Munchie?
Ah, well, we're not in Toronto anymore, so what happened? Well, Simon doesn't initially know. He looks down and he sees his own hands moving, he hears his own voice, he feels his own body jolt into action as he stands up and walks around. It's not him that's changed, it's his location. He's in something that at first seems kind of like a spaceship or the back rooms of a Fazbear pizzeria. It's a metal-lined web of corridors and dark, damp rooms and bits of machinery jutting out of every corner. Simon handles his new circumstances surprisingly well, remarking aloud that he needs to calm down or he'll make things worse. And worse is the operative word here. Weird shit is afoot. The edges of Simon's vision flicker and pixelate, he touches broken machinery and somehow hears what we can only assume is their final moments, and when he hears humans screaming behind a door, he runs to open it only to be knocked unconscious by a hulking machine. Good start. Getting to his feet and sweeping himself off, Simon learns he's in a place called Pathos-II. What this means, he isn't sure. But since Pathos is defined as evoking pity and sadness, I don't imagine it's going to be a good day out. It's only when we grab an Omnitool, essentially a high-tech key, and get outside that we realise we aren't in space. We are underwater deep down, sitting safely on the ocean floor. A lot of people tell me that this game reminds them of BioShock, and it's like, is it because it's underwater? But how did Simon get all the way down onto the ocean floor in the blink of an eye? Down in the dark, in a future he could never have foreseen, trapped in an underwater prison he can't escape, now dealing with a problem he never signed up to deal with, is Simon even Simon? Tackling issues of transhumanism, identity, and the ethics of damning others to hell in exchange for your own leg up to heaven, SOMA has stuck with me more than any other story in gaming. Nothing has ever come close. well, maybe Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, but SOMA still takes the top. I think SOMA is one of the best examples I've ever seen of capturing the heights of intimate first-person horror. Body horror, existential horror, and just horror. Finding yourself in hell, a hell you never thought existed. It's not so much the game itself, but more the feelings and questions it leaves you with that stick with you. SOMA asks questions we simply don't have answers for right now. It poses ideas and themes that are sci-fi in practice, but in a universe of infinite possibilities, may well be something any one of us could randomly wake up to. And today, I'm going to tell you why. Before I start the meat of this video, happy 30k! Jesus! Thank you everyone who's ever watched my videos and ever taken the time to like and comment. I cannot believe it. I'm really happy you guys like my videos. My mum is really proud of me. I will make more. Forever. You won't be able to stop me. With that said, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy it. I make gaming videos as often as I can, rankings, reviews, general discussions, so make sure to stick around if you want more content. And comment your own thoughts on SOMA. How did you interpret it? Are there any similar games you'd recommend? Asking for a friend, of course. Moreover, check out my Patreon in the description below. I've just reached my first goal and will be making a video on how much I fucking hate the movie Ready Player One, which, if I can figure it out, will be available to patrons early, so if you also hate that film, it's a good opportunity to mince on it with me. Finally, check out my Twitch over at twitch.tv/merkkk to chat games in real time. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Time to walk you through the game, talk to you about all the things that stuck with me, and make reference to a few other pieces of media I thought covered similar concepts really well. Lots of stuff to be looking at. So, warning, full spoilers ahead for SOMA, but also a little UK TV show called Black Mirror, the White Christmas special specifically, and light spoilers ahead for the Black Museum episode 2. So if you really want to watch those, go and watch them before I do the video, because I will be spoiling chunks of them. We will be talking about Black Mirror today, and it's because I feel it has some parallels. Now, thank you for watching, let's get started. I've wanted to talk about SOMA for a long time. Every time I drink with a friend who's not played it, I always end up recommending it, even if we weren't talking about games in the first place. I'm typing this while I wait for my dye to set at the hairdressers, and you can bet my ass I'm going to be telling Jay all about it when he's giving me my trim. The reason I waited so long to discuss this was because I usually like to talk about games in a wider context, with similar pieces of media to compare it to. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture and Hellstar Remina, The Suicide of Rachel Foster and Lolita, The Last of Us Part 2, and The Last of Us Part 1. I struggle to find a parallel with SOMA. For those of you who have played it, really rack your brain for me and try and think of something similar. And then tell me what it is so I can play, watch, or read it. SOMA tackles theoretical concepts so rooted in a distant future that finding good comparisons can be quite difficult. Plus, the gameplay is not fantastic. It is one fail state away from being a walking simulator. The puzzles are just press the one interactive button in this room that you have to find, but it's also the only accessible room. There's no choices to be made and there's no inventory system. No real thought beyond where is the lever that triggers the rest of this game. It's the story that works, but I didn't want to rehash it. Analyses have been done before by people far cooler than me, probably homeowners. I didn't want to walk the same path and just derivatively explain the game. That's weak, so I sat on it. That is until I had the flu earlier this month. During one delirious sleep, God knows what time, but it was pitch black outside, I suddenly jumped awake, grabbed my phone, and typed out 4 words into a random Discord conversation with a very confused friend. Black Mirror, White Christmas. Black Mirror is a very well-known show in the UK. I have no idea what the reception was like anywhere else, and like I said, I'm typing this in the hairdressers, so I won't be checking how it was received elsewhere, but for the sake of explanation, I will just give you a quick rundown. Black Mirror began airing back in 2011 on Netflix, written by a gentleman called Charlie Brooker, who took It's Because You're Always on That Damn Phone literally and made a series and a fortune off it. The term Black Mirror refers to the literal Black Mirror created when you turn off a laptop or phone screen and just see yourself and all your chins staring back at you. There you are, say hello. Black Mirror is episodic, meaning each episode tells a distinct story. While some references do carry across episodes, there's no continuity that's important. They're very good. If you ever fancy watching some, check out Nosedive, 15 Million Merits, and the one where the guy has to fuck a pig. But the episodes I want to talk about today involve depictions of scanning and copying humanity into another format. In the case of this TV show, they make digital copies, but the process and outcome is similar enough to that shown in SOMA that I reckon we can really drill down into it. Now, the episode that bothered me was White Christmas, and my phone auto-corrected white to whore. Fantastic. As White Christmas begins, our scene starts in the kitchen of a small, cozy cabin with snow hammering at the windows. We've got John Hamm, hired to be the hottest man on set as always, cheerfully prepping a delicious Christmas dinner. In walks Potter, personality English, and the two chat. We learn that they've been working together for years, but barely ever shared a word with one another, and Hamm's character, Matt Trent, nudges Potter into sitting with him and getting to know him. Potter won't crack, so Trent decides to share his own story first. It's not massively relevant to us, so I won't go into it, but what is relevant to us is Trent's job. So Black Mirror is set in a slightly futuristic world. It's similar enough to ours that almost everything is the same, but with advancements in technology several steps ahead of what's possible for us. Throughout the series, we see hyper-realistic VR, dystopian future workstations, invasive monitoring systems, and advanced military tech that's turned against us and hunted us to extinction. There are a lot of cool concepts in Black Mirror, and I wish I could cover them all here, but maybe I'll get an opportunity to in a future video. Back to the point, but Trent's job is that he works with cookies. Cookies aren't cookies like how we know them, when you visit a website for the first time and you try to click something only for that slow loading pop-up to impede your movement until you click agree all, or work through a checklist of cookie types that you don't really understand. These cookies are sentient. Essentially, a willing participant undergoes an operation wherein a blank cookie is implanted into their brain. This cookie then monitors the brain activity, learns it, and copies it. After about a week, the cookie is removed, a perfectly sentient copy of the original participant, who believes it is the original participant that's now been wrongly ripped from their own body, while some imposter remains, which Trent then implants into a smart house device. The thing about cookies is that they have full sentience. They are fully aware of themselves and they believe they are the original person. Even when shown their human equivalent walking around, cookies know they are themselves. For as far as they're concerned, they are the original. Imagine if that was you, to find out all of a sudden that your entire life is just a memory you've quickly swabbed from the inside of somebody else's skull. But knowing also that you experience those things. Those are your memories, but they're also not. That's you, but is it? They can never sleep, never eat, and never die, and the original person has no idea that their new smart home is an extremely self-aware slave. But how can they be slaves? Well, through a careful method of persuasion, Trent forces these cookies to accept their new roles, making toast, setting the heat of the house, restocking the fridge, and when I say careful method of persuasion, I mean he has the ability to make these cookies experience time. Days, weeks, and months, but in the span of seconds. Trent takes a couple of bites of toast while he forces the cookie to live out 3 weeks of silence in a white, empty room. When she pops back to reality, again refusing to be a slave since only a moment ago she was a living, breathing person with dreams, he puts her in the hole for months. Months and months in a silent, dead, white room. Nothing to see, hear, do, or even perceive. She can't even sleep. She pops back into existence again and he threatens her with more isolation. He can do this forever. All he has to do is wait. He remarks that the persuasion technique is very persuasive, but leave a cookie too long and they go mad. Because they're actual brains, Trent. That's all a person is. Eventually she agrees, putting her whole life behind her to serve a woman who only seems like an imposter to her. Probably seething with murderous, jealous hatred, she sits at a digital desk for the rest of her owner's natural-born life and uses her infinite power to set the air conditioning and act as a morning alarm. Does she have an expiration date? Will there ever be a point where she's decommissioned, or is she just damned to be a living sentient creature forever? Is she allowed to read books or watch TV? I don't think so. Potter comments on the cruelty of that, and Trent is actually a bit surprised. He responds that it's not typically the norm for people to care about cookies. They're not real. They don't have rights, and it's uncommon for anyone to make a fuss about their treatment. Kind of like Tamagotchis. You just drop them in the drawer when you're done with them and forget about them for years. Their batteries go out, they vanish from existence, and then let's say a century later you pop a new battery in them and here they are. I wonder how that's relevant to Simon. As Simon embarks through the facility, he hears a voice recording where a woman named Amy is reminiscing on her final moments at Upsilon before she moves to her new workstation, Theta. What's Upsilon? Nothing. What's Upsilon with you? Sorry. She's joined by a male speaker who comments on the psychotic machines at Upsilon, and Amy comments it's not Upsilon's fault it got swarmed. Okay, so we've got our first bit of context. We are in an undersea facility that used to be manned by people. The undersea facility is called Pathos-II, and each individual building, or component, is called a different name. This one was Upsilon. But machines attacked them, spawning from where we spawned, Upsilon, and all the people had to move somewhere else. Simple. We head onward and enter a room to find a machine with 2 cords plugged into 2 strange holes. And yes, before you say, they do look like buttholes. The machine is covered in a weird luminescent gel with glowing blue pustules. We unplug the first cord from the first butthole, and the machine pipes up saying, "Don't, I need it." Coldly and uncaringly, you plug the other. Or maybe you don't even hear her, or you don't even realise. Maybe you don't know she's talking to you. The machine, having lost its power source, asks why you did it. She was happy, and then she dies. It's probably for the best. Although we've heard voices and seen little puttering machines before, this machine, I think, is the first machine we ever see that has a startling amount of humanity. And depending on what you're more focused on at the moment, you might miss her almost entirely. You have to turn your back to her to unplug the tendrils she's plugged in with, so her Her pleas for help happen when your back is turned. If you are focused on the objective or paying attention elsewhere, you probably miss hearing her beg for her life behind you. If you do notice her, which you probably will, she is strange. She's very human. The way she speaks has emotion, intonations, purpose. She's not a machine that announces that the power source has been disconnected in a weird robotic voice. She's bitterly sad and confused, wondering why you've taken something away from her. She sounds sweet. We got on the phone with a woman. Yoo-hoo! Another human. She asks where Simon is. He explains and she tells him to head to the comms center. We head upstairs towards said comms center and find another machine. As the light comes on, the machine goes, "Oh shit, this isn't right. I blacked out. Amy? Rogers? I could use some help here." The machine is Carl Semken, a man whose corpse we can find nearby, complete with ID tag. Carl asks what happened to us, accusing us of being terrible help, and if you talk to him, you learn that he genuinely does see himself as a person, despite being a robot there on the floor in front of you. He talks like a person, and he does think like a person. To him, he's just had a fall. He's just stuck on the floor and he needs a bit of help. Well, do I have some help for you, Carl? In order to reach the comms center, Simon has to shift some power around, remove power from some areas, transfer it to others, and in the process, he might accidentally run a live current through said machine, and said machine might suffer some of the sincerest, unrelenting human agony ever conceived. What happens when you run a strong electrical current through yourself? You die. What happens when you run a strong electrical current through yourself in a body that can feel pain but can't die? Well, with that done, we just walk off. We've got what little help we need from this situation at the expense of this machine, and we walk away, leaving him to suffer. Luckily, I think, the building caves in shortly thereafter, crumbling under the weight of the ocean, and hopefully ending his misery, but who knows? How long do you reckon he's down there for, tortured infinitely in an indestructible body? There's a lot of things you can do with a digital mind in an indestructible body, and I think that for me, it is probably the worst part of any of this story. I find body horror particularly intriguing, but I find existential horror to be absolutely mentally crippling. Because, you see, returning to Black Mirror, this is exactly where they go too. So, the cabin isn't real. Neither are the two men, technically. Trent is there, essentially in VR, but Potter is a cookie extracted from the mind of real-life Potter and implanted there the same way as the woman was, into the smart house device. Trent manipulated the time to make Potter feel as though he'd already spent 4 years in the cabin, and then tried to sit him down and get to know him. Hopefully I'm making even a tickle of sense, but if I'm not, I don't know. Go watch the episode, I guess, it's pretty good. But why are they here? Well, it's to extract a confession. Potter was responsible for a crime, and this was essentially how he was tricked into admitting fault. By simulating 4 years in a cabin and then sitting him down, lulling him into a false sense of security, and then extracting a confession. There's a lot wrong here ethically, I think, but it's not what really stuck with me about this episode. With the confession finally extracted from the cookie, an entity that has been fooled and exploited and used, Trent is removed from the simulation, leaving Potter alone in the cabin, confused and upset that the man he worked alongside for years has just vanished without a trace. We back out to the police station now, seeing the interrogator send Trent on his way. That's a whole thing, and then they look to one another. Christmas is about to hit, and one of the officers takes the cookie, the little egg timer thing we saw earlier in the episode, fiddles with the time dilation on it, and whacks on a Christmas song to play on loop for Potter. He asks his co-worker, should I change it back? Perhaps having second thoughts about how cruel it might be, but she laughs. No, she says, leave him on for Christmas. And so they get up and they head off for Christmas. Inside the cabin, Potter hears the radio flick on, playing the song the police officer picked. Angrily, he throws the radio on the floor. It respawns, the music playing louder. He throws it again. It respawns, louder. He doesn't get the message and he throws it again. It respawns. It doesn't sound that loud until he screams and you can hear the music drowning his voice out. Poor Potter. Leaving Potter in that egg for the rest of Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day, we are looking at around 4 million years, depending on specifically how long he's left unattended. 4 million years of the same screaming loud song on repeat, in a body that can't die or even sleep, in a tiny cabin that he can't leave, with nothing to do and no one to know. What do you think that would do to you? And when you think about it, this cookie is innocent. It is the person that committed a crime, and from that he definitely could do the things original Potter did, but he was technically born after the crime happened. This cookie has never done anything bad in its short life, and yet he gets punished for millions of years. How is that fair? Black Mirror is an examination of the worst case scenario, taking future steps that could be used for good and highlighting the potential ethical, technical, and interpersonal issues that could follow as a consequence. But still within a functional society, not some post-apocalyptic world, but how it would fit with our current structure. With that in mind, this scene has always really bothered me. What a waste of genuine consciousness. Imagine what would happen if you put a load of these cookies on an island with all the stimulus in the world and fast forward 1,000 years. I mean, sure, they might descend into madness and all try and kill each other, but they also might come up with some cool shit. It's an interesting experiment. Simon gets to the comms center and meets Catherine Chun, a friendly sounding woman, albeit a bit confused. She asks Simon where in Pathos-II he worked, and he's obviously got no idea what that even is. She asks how he got here. He doesn't know. She asks what he's seen, and he said weird robots, and now she's even more confused. Apparently, at least. There's a whole wavelength missing between these two. It's actually quite frustrating to listen to. Like, if you had two phones, dialed two pizza places, and put them on speakerphone together just to listen to them awkwardly figure out what's going on, that's kind of what this would be like. As Simon speaks to her during the first interactions, via phone, she definitely seems to be hiding something. She's very indirect with how she answers questions, and sometimes seems to play dumb for the sake of procrastinating on giving Simon solid answers. Like trying to talk around the subject of getting a job with your mum, you just talk in circles until she gets annoyed enough to leave the room. Still, Catherine's intention is very clear, to get Simon to come to her, and she is a stone wall until he does. The building collapses in on itself and Simon is hit by a wall of water, knocking him out. When he comes to, he's underwater, right at the bottom of the ocean. He looks at his hands, confused, and they morph into black gloved hands like he's in a full body wetsuit. He's even more confused. As Simon begins to bounce across the ocean floor, wheezing like an asthma sufferer, he runs into a roaming machine, which is pleading for structure gel, whatever that is, claiming it needs it for the pain. The machine has a shaky, breathy voice, like it's struggling to keep its breath, but it's a machine. He shouts at Simon to wait up, come back, give him gel, and gets agitated when Simon legs it. Take it easy, Wheezy. Simon enters the shuttle station, finding logs to indicate that the machines chased people here, but the power to the shuttles was severed. One woman, Amy, who we heard earlier, went to fix the power to get things moving. But this is a survival horror, so naturally she didn't get very far. We find Amy down here, still alive, linked up to some iron lung that pumps air into her body by force, all sorts of wires protruding from her, where she lies miserably on the ground. At first she speaks in a little voice and pleads that we won't hurt her, but when we speak kindly to her she says, "It won't let me die, nothing is allowed to die, I want to go home." The it she's referring to is the Warden unit, an omnipotent AI that regulates temperature, oxygen, water, etc., with supreme control over the facility and the denizens therein. The WoW is chiefly responsible for being the warden for all humanity here on Pathos-II, only it seems to maybe have taken its role a bit too literally. This is the first time we really see the Warden unit in action. You might have heard it mentioned a few times in the game already, but this is the first time we see it. Amy and her conundrum are what, on a first playthrough, I could only assume to be the inevitable result of teaching a clever robot the laws of robotics. There are 3 laws of robotics, also known as Asimov's laws, if you've heard of them. They are: 1. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. Laying them all out in their simplest terms, yeah, sure, makes sense. My sewing machine isn't allowed to come alive and beat the shit out of me. Awesome. In black and white, that's clear cut. Amy was mortally wounded in the subway, and as a consequence of the first law, the Warden unit, or WoW as we'll call it, cannot allow her to die due to inaction. It cannot let her bleed to death, so it picks her up, plugs her into the wall like an air freshener, gives her new lungs, and forces her to breathe. She is alive, in the strictest sense of the word. She's not living, but she is alive, and that's all the literal terminology that the first law cares about. How long would Amy have sat there had we not found her? Amy can't ask to die, because that conflicts with the second law. If she asks her to die, it would be causing her harm in the most literal sense, so it can't do that for her. A lot of media has covered this, a lot of short stories about being the last human alive and trying to bargain for death while smiling robots keep you as safe as they know how. And it is very thought-provoking. The cookies can't die either by age or harm, and I don't know if they can even injure themselves on purpose, or if they can injure themselves, do they stay injured forever in even worse pain, or do they heal up? Asimov's laws apply here too, in a more omnipotent way. When you teach AI something as definitive, it takes that as definitive, and the laws of robotics taught definitively, with no wiggle room, no perspective and no context, no nuance and no consideration, will definitely see results like this. It's a pretty cool and immediate cautionary tale on teaching such a clever and powerful program such a literal sense of laws. But it's also haunting. Down there in the dark and the damp and the cold, pumped full of oxygen and blood and fake food and water, what life life is that? Ultimately, the WoW is only doing as programmed. It is saving and maintaining human life exactly as it was asked to do. Only it's taken it literally. And as I learned, these 3 laws of robotics don't necessarily seem to be the code of ethics the WoW is operating on, but we will get to that later. Long story short, you kill Amy here by unplugging her, obviously, because it is the honourable thing to do, and then you head out on your way, the weight of a mercy killing weighing on your shoulders like those buckets from Mulan. They do look heavy, don't they? We finally find Catherine and, oh, well, this is awkward. She's not a flesh and blood roasty, she's a digital roasty, a roasty with RAM. That's not quite what Simon was looking for. He literally looks at her and goes, oh, in this sad as fuck voice. It's quite funny. Imagine if someone showed up to meet you and just went, oh. Regardless, Catherine's pretty chipper. I was human once, she assures him brightly. Simon tells her, I am the only human left, and Catherine corrects him with the twist we'd probably all figured out by this point, but I actually hadn't figured it out when I played it for the first time, and I was quite surprised. You're a walking, talking diving suit, she says. Yeah, that makes sense. The premise of SOMA is simple. We aren't Simon, or we are in a way. The original Simon is dead, long dead, and has been dead for around 100 years. That brain scan he did that one day in that doctor's office sat around for a long time, tucked away and archived, passed into the cloud, shuffled around on systems. Data that was never deleted, but should have been. Because, you see, Simon has been uploaded onto a mechanical body. Well, it's not entirely mechanical, but I'll cover that later. Simon lived a full 26 years, sat down in that chair for his brain scan, and that scan was taken as a discrete piece of information and held for a century. Of course, this new Simon wasn't awake for this century. Like sleeping, it passed in a second, and suddenly he was just awake, jarringly zapped into an immediate existence, life completely uninterrupted. His brain simply picked up where it left off. Simon grapples with the information at hand and then deflects it, and that's understandable. I don't think the brain, and I mean, he technically doesn't have a brain, it's a computer chip implanted into something we'll discuss later, would appreciate being told that it's not in the vessel it thinks it is. Considering Simon saw his hands as flesh for a long time and hears his voice as his voice, and for all he know he could actually have a more robotic voice, but the brain is hiding it from him, he's definitely subconsciously protecting himself from the truth here, and I get it. While Simon grapples with the weight of his newfound identity, Catherine is all action. She wants a ride in Simon's Omnitool, but she's not buying him dinner first, and announces that she will eject her own Cortex chip, her actual brain, her entire personhood, and all Simon needs to do is plug into the Omnitool. You've put a lot of trust into this man, Catherine. Personally, I found her casual attitude towards being a machine fairly concerning. Catherine's immediately at peace with her new body and form, particularly since she was likely only woken up for the first time when Simon fixed the power in Upsilon. But imagine spitting out your brain, briefly being dead, and trusting someone to take it and plug it into somewhere new. I saved all the people on the station as brain scans and put them into an artificial world, Catherine explains like it's nothing, and then we're going to blast them into space. Blast them into space? Are you high, Cathy? She explains that it was initially just a pet project, but became something of serious importance after a comet hit the surface of the planet, eradicating all life on the planet's surface. Okay, a comet. That's a lot to deal with. Mass extinction events usually are. With just the people in Pathos-II left, the project became known as the ARK. However, Catherine doesn't know how far along the project ever made it. She is a scan that was done early in the project's life cycle. As a result, she only has memories up to that point, and she knows nothing about what happened afterwards. Simon asks her if she's responsible for the robots that have been stumbling around, but she says no. She would expect more sense if they were hers, but then who made them? He explains that he's a scan from Toronto in 2015, and Catherine is confused. Why would anyone bring a scan from Toronto, she verbalizes, implying that his scan should not be there. Maybe it was piled in as part of an initial training or tutorial data, or used as a demonstration tool, or maybe just on archived archives, never scrubbed from the system. Either way, Simon is here now. We see the Ark and its plans. It's an Elysium, somewhere between high fantasy and, like, heaven, but it's not left Earth, it's stranded somewhere in the facility. Simon takes one look at the Ark and asks if they can get on it. Catherine is reluctant on every front, but Simon is very insistent. There's nothing else to do here, he remarks, suddenly fixated on this end goal. I kinda get it, Simon. Because as he learns more about the apocalypse, we realise he probably should be quite fixated on this end goal. As we venture through the story, we learn that Earth was hit by an enormous comet, Comet Telos, and we hear a voice recording of two people observing the fallout. One comments that all the continents were engulfed by fire reaching all the way to the pitch black sky, obliterating all life on our tiny rock. It hit several months ago in game, but the fires are still burning across the coasts and the planet is covered in thick black smoke. The world was completely destroyed without a trace of life remaining. clean, all except the folks on Pathos-II, safe on the seafloor. Simon rips some tentacle things out of some other mechanical things, sorry, I'm no engineer, and Catherine explains that these black tentacles and all the strange glowing webbing and the weird jelly we've been seeing so far is a manifestation of the WoW, a malfunctioning AI. Catherine goes on, it's not a persona, it doesn't think or feel, it's more like a cancer. We talked a bit before about how AI tends to take instructions literally, such as the laws of robotics, and how this can be a monkey's paw situation when applied to real-world situations. I think in that sense, the comparison to cancer is actually really interesting. To keep a long story short, cancer is caused by malfunctions in our genes. When DNA replicates itself as part of the cell division process, it can sometimes replicate itself incorrectly. These are called mutations. In a sense, it's kind of like a game of Chinese whispers. For example, in the simplest possible sense, our DNA contains a gene called a tumor suppressor gene. As implied, these genes exist to prevent tumors from growing in our body. If one DNA gets a note that says tumor suppressor gene active but mutates, it might pass on a note that says deactivate the tumor suppressor gene, and thus pass that along. The DNA therefore no longer prevents tumors from growing. The cells grow more and more uncontrollably, creating tumors. This is cancer, and this is a great comparison to the way that the WoW seems to operate, because the DNA isn't becoming cancerous out of spite. It's not alive, it has no personal vendetta against you, it's not doing it on purpose, and it's not malicious, it's not taking an issue with you. It's doing its best and following its instructions to a T, but sometimes those instructions are faulty or incorrect. It still follows the instructions as it's told to do, even when it causes your body harm. The WoW is the same, it can only do what it's told, but when those instructions are faulty, short-sighted, or lacking a backdoor we can use to deactivate it or reteach it, it will barrel on with those instructions forever. The only difference being that while DNA begins, on the most part, with a set of correct instructions which are vulnerable to mutation, the WoW had faulty instructions from the beginning, being that its creators could never have accounted for every possible circumstance the WoW would need to operate under, like an apocalypse. The WoW is also self-learning, so if it gets the wrong idea about a piece of information it's presented with, it will move forward with that assumption and cement those misunderstandings. So basically it's our fault, but it's also not really a situation we could ever be expected to be perfect at, so yeah, 50-50. We arrive at Delta in a crash landing, only to be freed from our capsule by a lovely little bot with a blowtorch that we'll call Blowy. Blowy chippers at us and toddles around, keeping a friendly eye on us while we explore. He doesn't speak, he's more like a little companion who just wants to help. There are a few bots here. One robot remarks in the blokiest voice ever, "What a day, am I right? Can't believe how much I'm sweating in this suit," as he just floats around. Some of the machines we've encountered so far have real humanity, but some of them seem more two-dimensional, like echoes of a person rather than actual persona. I think it can be easy to see these robots as less in some ways, being echoes of the people whose brain scans were commandeered for the sake of creating them. But it wasn't until I saw the Black Mirror episode Black Museum that I started to find a different perspective. In Black Museum, we find a cookie used as part of a museum exhibit, a man called Clayton Lee. Clayton Lee was, in life, convicted of a murder and sentenced to death, but the evidence was conflicting, and it seems like he was wrongly sentenced. Still, the owner of the museum, a man named Rollo Haynes, took a cookie of Clayton before he was killed via electric chair, and put him in his museum for people to come and look at. One of the special features of this exhibit allowed you to pull the switch on Clayton yourself. With a cookie that can't die, Rollo could give people the quote-unquote excitement of flipping the switch on an electric chair and watching a man fry. Except the man can't die. Every single time somebody did this, they would be given a souvenir. The souvenir was a new cookie of Clayton, a new copy, in a small keyring, permanently shocked. Forever. And that's not a 2D imprint either, that's a full consciousness, like we've seen throughout this video, experiencing infinite agony for as long as that keyring exists. Hopefully the battery life isn't too long. In comparison to White Christmas, where we see a colder, less intimate overview of how cookies work in lots of different situations, Black Museum's portrayal is significantly more intimate. It will never reach the level of empathy you can reach simply by playing SOMA. We aren't Clayton in this media, we're just watching him. But imagine any one of those keyrings being any one of the robots we find around, and we can start to put some pieces together. It was only when I imagined being that cookie, breathed into life specifically to be a spectacle of cruel suffering, that I realized I couldn't possibly apportion value to this life above others. Because as likely as you are to roll the dice and land on living, breathing human, you are likely to land on digital cookie forever doomed to undergo electroshock therapy for the uncaring amusement of a suburban family who thought that this would be a fun day out. As this section of the game rambles on, we find a zeppelin which is used to transport items between sites when they're too big for the shuttle system, and we can use that to make the final trip over to Theta, but the tool chip is bust and we need one. Catherine suggests just grabbing one from a robot. They're just robots, she says, maintaining a borderline psychopathic insistence that these guys are insignificant enough to be chopped up and used for parts, despite knowing what we know about them. Simon reminds her, isn't that cruel? We are robots. He doesn't crack her exterior. Catherine has a goal and she will have Simon do her dirty work for her to get where she needs to go. Simon begrudgingly grabs a stun baton and beats the shit out of Blowy. The worst part of this, I feel, is that it doesn't take one stun to kill them. It takes several, during which they run away feeling pain and discomfort and trying to hide from you. I'll say it now, but this game slowly introduces you to the value of life, and not in a good way. First of all, we find the robot with the woman's voice plugged into the station back at Upsilon. She's just a robot, so you can barely tell her apart from your surroundings until you've already unplugged one tentacle. By that point, it might not have even hit you yet that she's asking you to stop. It certainly hadn't for me. It was only on a point of reflection that I gave it some genuine thought. Then we've got Carl Simpkin before the comms center, screaming in agony as you reroute the power. We don't kill him per se, but he's not exactly happy, and we still don't know what's going on. It could just be a really well-made machine or an elaborate assistant. It's not a situation we've ever seen, so we torture him out of ignorance, not malice, especially if you don't know you don't have to torture him to get the same result, which I personally didn't. Third, we find a woman in the tunnels. It only makes sense to mercy kill her, so we take human life out of pity, but also because we need the power she's plugged into. Now, we find a robot that doesn't want to die, but also can't communicate, and again has anything we need. Except we do know the context and can no longer claim ignorance, and yet we still zap it to death and cut it open. This game has already given us 4 instances whereby to get our foot forward and to step closer to this digital heaven, this final paradise, we have no choice but to hurt and kill. The first 2 instances you could plead ignorance for. In the third instance, the mercy kill was almost an obligation. It would have felt awful leaving her there. The most recent choice is much harder, but I feel it was made easier by having already killed before. It's for the ARK, Catherine reassures us. But killing innocents to access paradise seems, well, it's ironic, isn't it? The ARK is already a biblical name, so if you consider it an allegory for heaven, I mean, it's not really how this is supposed to work, is it? Don't get me wrong, I do like it, this seamless way of training the player, in a sense, to act selfishly with a greater goal in mind. We're saving mankind, we say, as we gut a robot that's fleeing us. They're just robots, we reassure ourselves, stealing power away from those that need it. They can't feel real pain, we say, putting an electrical current through a screaming man's body. We have a purpose and a mission, and our methods of completing that mission might be unorthodox, but they're ours by any means necessary. Hey, just like the WoW's mission, I suppose. Sure, some people play this game without killing a single person, but to do that seems almost selfish. A small sense of piety in exchange for the eternal torture of the remaining, undeserving, miserable dregs of humanity. For those who did take the killing route, the game is slowly working us up the ladder, making each stepping stone easier rather than having us make one massive jump. And we will make some massive jumps, so stay tuned. Simon really wants to discuss this existential crisis he's feeling, but rather than help him through it, Catherine is acting like he won't stop going on about football and just tells him to hit the switch.
It's just beginning to sink in. I mean, really sink in. I'm a robot.
Didn't we cover this already?
Guess I've known ever since I woke up at Upsilon. I just keep suppressing it. Like my brain doesn't want me to think about it. It's really getting hard not to think about it.
Yeah. Could you maybe hit that switch over there so we could get moving?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, technically, I don't have any ears, no mouth. Christ, that's a weird thing to think about. I mean, I'm making sounds. I'm still saying things.
You sure are.
Does that mean I shouldn't think about this stuff, or are my thoughts actually making me cope? Could I tip the balance by suddenly gaining some insight and go insane?
I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, we have real things to deal with. Saving mankind, remember? It's really complicated to explain how machines think, Simon. Concentrate on getting inside Theta, okay? See you soon.
She's either bored of the discussion, doesn't care about him, is concerned he'll go mad if she does explain, or she just wants him to satisfy her agenda. All of them, I'm sure there's factors there. Oh, Catherine, you flat-screen siren. Emotions and concerns completely disregarded, propelled forwards by the promise of the ARK, Simon shuffles into Theta. Here, we are presented with an entirely new dimension on what the WoW is and what it can do. There are a few screaming dickheads here called proxies, and they have their own stories to them, but the real horror of this segment, I feel, are the comatose victims. victims. They're scattered around the site, all stuck in this weird jam that comes out of the walls, and you can hear them breathing heavily. They're definitely alive, but they're like covered in bed sores and rashes and lumps, and some of them are even talking. Why? Because they're asleep. They're dreaming. After some guy called Tim, I think it's Tim, sniffed some structure gel and went a bit mad, he attacked this facility and put many members of the crew into a deep sleep. All of them are dreaming good dreams, they're very happy, but their bodies are literally rotting here and they will just decompose forever. I suppose it's not as bad as Amy's conundrum, but imagine if, for example, the WoW just stopped working one day. Would these people die, or would they wake up, and then what? Simon finds a bunch of legacy scans, David Munchie, Paul Berg, some woman, and Simon. Simon finds his own scan, a legacy scan as he's told, and he hears his final words to Munchie, where he gives permission to have his brain scan used for training and research purposes in the future. It'll be like a part of me lives on, Simon says. Oopsie poopums, Simon, I bet you're rethinking that consent form now. But there were 4 people here, 4 legacy scans, and 4 options for WoW-based resurrection. Why was Simon the one they resurrected? Grappling again with clawing tendrils of madness, Simon decides to do something else to keep his mind off it. He decides to play God. See, the place is locked down with a security cipher that was created after Catherine was scanned, meaning she has no idea what it is, and it's not the kind of thing to be written down. It's going to be stored safely in the brain of one of the other crew members, except there's no one left, and we can't exactly go ask that screaming pile of haggis over there. It's no big deal. I mean, this game essentially boils down to go and find Object A on that side of the map and take it to Location A on the other side of the map, and then press the only interactive button available. But in this case, Object A happens to be a brain scan of a person who worked here. But how do you extract information from a brain scan? Well, it's easy. You load them into a familiar world, you make the place feel comfortable and natural, but within constraints, and then you slap in a presence to extract that information. Except you probably won't get it right the first time. But if that's our cookie, that's an entire life created, an entire backlog of memories fed in, an entire entity produced whose only role is to have a panic attack before the system shuts down, erasing that life from existence. The first time I played this, I trial and errored it until I had what I needed. Our subject, Brandon, in the brain scan chair with his friend Amy in the same room talking to him. Eventually, you have him in the ideal conditions, and Catherine speaks through the projection of Amy to get the information she wants. At this point, the simulation is completely shut down, but you can choose to erase it. I think the first time I played this, I didn't erase it. I'm the only one left, I thought. No one's going to be coming along and making this worse. May as well leave these for the potential future that we might one day see if there's ever life again on this planet. But this time, I thought about Clayton Lee. Not to say Brandon's going to spend the rest of his life frying in agony, but just considering the potential cruelty that hypothetical future life form could bring Brandon, I decided to spare him the possibility of suffering forever for the slim chance that good would be done with it. In this game, humanity is dangling by a thread. What's left is either suffering in agony, enjoying the same lifestyle as a piece of black mold, or whacked into any odd piece of machinery and stuck in a halfway life. There's a lot here about letting go, and Brandon is the first entity we meet that we can kill, but we don't need to kill in order to move on to the ARK. So yeah, I got rid. I think it's for the best. With the security cipher in hand, we move on. In this section of the game, we learn that people in this facility had some very strange ideas about how to get onto the ARK. After scanning his brain, a man called Mark Sarang killed himself to ensure the continuity, believing that if he ended his life at the point where his consciousness forked, he would be taken to the ARK. This sparked a line of scanned suicides throughout others who believed his theory, likely raising the average IQ significantly among the remaining team. The space gun, very professionally named, is sitting in the depths of the ocean, down in some trench. To fire shit into space, we need momentum, and for momentum, we need distance. So the idea is that the gun sits low, far below sea level, to give whatever's being flung into space enough distance to build up the speed to fly right into the orbit. If this was on land, it would be comically big, I imagine, and uncomfortably phallic. To get all the way down to where this space gun is waiting, we need access to a Dunbat, a capsule-style shuttle that can withstand a fuck-ton of pressure, fuck-ton being the official measurement, but unfortunately the Dunbat seems to have gained sentience in Catherine's absence. Classic. Oh no, I lost my Dunbat. My mom's gonna fucking kill me. So yeah, the Dunbat is out of the question. Catherine ruminates on this setback for a bit before remembering that there are special suits that individuals can wear to withstand the pressure. Except this suit is at Omicron, which means more walking in this definitely not walking simulator because we have puzzle elements and light enemy AI. So let's go. Before they head out, Simon hops into some kissing booth, except instead of kissing, it's a scanner that they can use to figure out what he's composed of. In which case is a corpse in a diving suit, Imogen Reed, Catherine's love interest or girlfriend girlfriend or something. Some kind of romance. In that case, she could stand to be a bit nicer to us, I reckon. Simon's horrified, and I get that. Corpse in a diving suit, but the structure gel in the suit has essentially melded the flesh and mechanisms together, so they're one in the same. But as Catherine says, this perfect combination is exactly what makes Simon sentient and capable, and also much less likely to go insane with stress, unlike all the other brainless machines. The Omicron facility is on lockdown when Simon arrives, which is a bit of a bummer, but then he interacts with the monitor to try and figure a way around it, and he's surprised to see the access code come rattling across the screen. For the first time in the game, something wants us to proceed, and naturally Simon is concerned about why. Catherine is unbothered.
Something wants us to come inside.
And we want to go inside. What's the problem?
Seriously, girl, you are beyond suspicious. It's not long after we're inside that we find our culprit, some dude. He appears in visions at first, making Simon's eyes bug out and glitch all over the place. Unlike the other screaming, angry entities we've seen in the facility, this guy is as British as they get. You need to stop it, he says with all the cadence of Matt Berry. Poison the well. Sure, I think, but I don't really know what that means, so I look around instead. We find a suit we can use, and when we crack it open, there's a headless corpse in there. It's a nice coincidence, being that there's a headless corpse in ours too. We just need a cortex chip and some structure gel and a packed lunch and we'll be good to go. So we plug Catherine in, she tells us how excited she is to transfer us to a new body, and leave to find out what we need. Remember back when we found Amy, back when we put her out of her misery, or didn't if you're a nut? Well, I mentioned the 3 laws of robotics. In quick summary, don't harm people, don't allow people to come to harm, and follow all orders unless those orders bring harm. Well, when we're here, we find out that a man called Johann Ross was pulled up from the seafloor in critical condition, basically dead or close to. In fact, the log about it says the body was identified as Johann Ross, implying he was so messed up that he needed to be properly identified. Johann is popped into a special chamber, and since his body contains structure gel, the WoW tries to speed his recovery along, or his resurrection, I suppose. What a sweet thing. Thing is, being in a chamber, Johann is physically unreachable. Consequently, the WoW uses electromagnetism to coerce the structure gel in John's system into healing him. And it does work, but this interferes with the black box and everyone else's suits, causing them horrible throbbing headaches, nosebleeds, and bleeding from the eyes. Gross. Due to the strange interference with Johann's internal structure gel, he is able to communicate telepathically with other members of the facility through, I assume, their black box. He warns them about the WoW, which is growing out of control down at Site Alpha, a secretive site most members of Pathos-II aren't aware of. No one will listen to him except a woman called Raleigh. In an audio log, we catch her asking a co-worker about Site Alpha, who responds, "I'm not at liberty to discuss that." It's apparent that Raleigh shouldn't be asking these questions. It's only when Raleigh decides to take on Johann's request to destroy the WoW that the WoW panics. The electromagnetic energy it was using to heal Johann flares up, the WoW shrieks, feeding an enormous dose of electromagnetic energy into the black box of every crew member, and their heads all immediately explode. And as you wander around a building full of headless bodies with fried black boxes that return only static, you realise that maybe the WoW was never following that life-preserving law of robotics in the first place, or at least those laws are not absolute enough that the WoW is completely prevented from acting in a way that will cause death to like 10 people at once. The term shriek implies it was an action of instinct too, which demonstrates a higher level of impulse than a computer program would have. There are a few possible interpretations we can take from why the WoW would act this way. Is it throwing a stubborn, angry fit because it wasn't allowed access to Johann, which would imply some level of thinking and feeling? Is it because Raleigh is poking her nose where it doesn't belong? No one's allowed to die, Amy tells us, but that's not true. Has the WoW's own priority of self-preservation exceeded the priority it places on humanity? The things we learn in this facility are so extremely interesting. Structure gel, which has always taken a narrative backseat up until this point, is suddenly explored here in detail. We learn that it can act as a fantastic conductor for electricity, but we also learn that it can make machines work more efficiently as a whole. If applied to a more complex object, i.e. a human body with all its inner machinations, it gets a bit confused and grows out of control. Like cancer, it sabotages the structure. It also has regenerative properties. Applied to a dead mouse, structure gel caused the mouse to appear alive, much to the visible distress of its fellow living mice, who it then attacks before dying again itself. It seems that when applied to dead biological material, the WoW reanimates the subject like an agitated sleepwalker or zombie. When applied to a robot, whether that robot has a brain scan in it, it creates a facade of humanity, like an echo of a person within a moment in time. But Simon is different, because the suit he's in have corpses in them. It seems like just organic material and mechanical material doesn't cut it. Simon is a perfect mixture of the two, a metal shell around a dead body. With this combination, he is a fully fleshed out human being. When you consider our planet, the only planet we know at time of writing that can sustain life, we have the absolute perfect combination of everything required to do that. Water, atmosphere, minerals, ozone, whatever. And the age-old debate is, was it an accident? Are we here by pure coincidence in a universe of millions of coincidences, or was it by design? And Simon, was he created by somebody with a goal in mind? When he's brought to life, there's a body in a room nearby headless, but was that the person who created Simon? Did the WoW create Simon? We see a blood streak from the vent in the wall leading to the chair we get up from, so we were clearly dragged before we were resurrected, but by whom and why? Was Simon the first of many potential correct creations? Had the WoW finally perfected the formula of humanity? Or was he just one accident in a sea of thousands? You could say it's a consequence of simply needing a main character for a game, and that's probably the answer, but it's always nice to speculate. However it is that's keeping these notes remarks, Structure Gel has always been capable of this, but it was the WoW that understood it well before us. And yes, before you ask, the WoW does try the reanimation thing on people. It's bleak. Simon returns with his stick and bindle full of his favourite toys and sets up his new body. He's very anxious about transferring himself, but Catherine talks him around. It's a simple transfer, she assures him, and says she's happy to do it herself if he refuses. You'd really leave me here alone? Simon asks, and Catherine confirms she would transfer herself into that body and leave him alone. Simon agrees to the transfer and gets into the pilot seat, at which point the scan happens much the same as it did in the prologue. There's a flash of light and then he's in his new body, but not before he hears his old body speak.
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just...
Catherine quickly shuts down old Simon by putting him to sleep, but it's too late. Simon demands to know what the fuck is going on, and Catherine goes, "You knew what would happen, Simon. It's a copy. Bitch, you said it was a transfer. I can't believe I'm getting gaslit by a fucking screensaver." She's definitely lied to Simon, but she talks him out of his quite reasonable annoyance. Because Simon is the one who now needs to clean up after her, she tells him you can drain his battery, effectively killing original Simon, or you can leave him to wake up here alone in a few days' time, surrounded by horrible creatures and, like, no games to play, not even a hog to squeeze. I felt bad for Simon because a lot of people think he's a very stupid protagonist, and in some ways he is, but I think it's also worth remembering that he was scanned into this database with significant brain damage. Brain damage that is now likely permanent because it is the default state of his scan. But, so if there's a narrative reason anywhere for him being a bit of a ninny, then that'll be it, and Catherine is definitely taking advantage of this. Simon talks about how he flipped a coin and ended up in the right body, but I don't think that's true. In my opinion, his life isn't like a branching tree that starts from one singularity. First Simon, Omicron Simon, and this Simon, Deep Sea Simon, they're all distinct people. They just don't know which one they are until they sit down for the scan, which makes those continuity suicides a bit on the silly side in perspective. Deep Sea Simon doesn't exist until the scan happens, but the memories he has create a strange timeline that works backwards from him. His experiences are the same. This is where the Simon we actually play as for the remainder of the game begins his journey. Our main character didn't exist until right this second. Up until now, we were playing through memories that had been quickly jammed into the back of a new Cortex chip. And now here's Omicron Simon, asleep, waiting for you to flip the switch. We've killed enough people up until this point. What's one more? With his new suit in tow, Simon hops into some elevator and begins the descent into the trench. During the journey down, a creature appears in the lift with him and says, "You did it, I will make preparations," and then zaps off. Catherine, who wasn't able to hear him speak, says, "I thought for sure he was going to kill you." "I'm glad it didn't," responds Simon, and that kind of stuck with me. By the time we arrive at Tau, we arrive in tandem with Ian Peterson, Catherine Chun, and a few others, at least in the past, as we see through data logs around the place. They're bringing the ARK to Tau, but why aren't they firing it off? Then there's this bloke called Jin Yoshida who shows up, and I had to turn the game off for a bit and play Crash Bandicoot because he follows you when you're not looking at him, even on baby mode, and it freaks me out. He's quite annoying actually, because I really wanted to read about all the stuff that was going on here, and he kept caving my head in and leaving me out back by the bins, so eventually I just had to run past him and get out. When we finally reach the living quarters of Tau, or Phi, or Apple Pie, or wherever it is we've been going all this time, we find a lot of corpses. Some of them are dead and still, but some of them have been manipulated by the WoW. Like the dead mouse we found kicking and twitching after interaction with the structure gel, these are just animate corpses. The lights are on, literally, but no one's home. They just sit and breathe with their sad clockwork lungs and occasionally murmur things that their old self might have said, but they're not sentient. Just a corpse with electricity running through them, making them twitch, making all the gizmos inside rumble to life. It's not all lost though. Well, I mean it is completely lost, but it's not 100% bad. Well, I mean it is, but you know what, I'll just tell you. There is one living person here, Sarah. She's a payload technician, which presumably means she likes Overwatch. Linked up to life support, she sits down here in the dark and honestly thinks that there are people up on the plateau who are going to come and fetch her one day. Silly bitch. Simon relays the news to her that she is the last living human, and she goes, oh, okay then, well in that case I'd rather die. And again, we have an opportunity for a very willing mercy kill with absolutely no gain for us beyond a clear conscience. I think SOMA focuses a lot on the theme of letting go. All manner of species thrived on this planet before the asteroid hit, with humans at the helm, and now it's all gone. Even if the people down in Pathos-II had survived, what were they supposed to do? Repopulate? Go up onto the continent with not even a scrap of vegetation left? The air full of toxic fumes? And do what exactly? When I was researching SOMA, I saw a few people say they'd spared other characters and not mercy killed them. Maybe leaving them all alive would make Pathos-II a happier place in your wake, but at what cost? Let the WoW run rampant with them and use them like a psychopathic 10-year-old with a set of Bratz dolls, a pair of scissors and a magnifying glass? Or kill the WoW and presumably have them lose their access to a steady environment or die slowly here instead? Amy's fake lungs are made by the WoW. If the WoW dies, I guess those lungs die too? I think that seeing everything I had to see during this game, ending humanity by my own hands felt like the right thing to do. Live down here in hell forever, barely scrape by, die horribly and miserably, or just let go? I felt like it was time to let go. Simon soldiers on. We kill the WoW or we don't, it's up to you, and then we finally make it to the mega space gun. Simon asks Catherine about the transfer process, and Catherine is happy to explain it to him, letting him know she's tied the scan button to the launch button to ensure they both get transferred in time. She's enthusiastic alongside Simon, and this guy doesn't think to ask any questions. He panics as the launch sequence counts down, and...
You gotta be kidding me!
4, 3,
Come on, load!
2.
Come on, load!
There we go. He's finally here. All this hard work, all this effort, all this suffering. Simon is finally on the ARK, and he and Catherine unite in front of a sprawling lake and a glistening, beautiful city, finally having reached paradise.
Fuck this! Fuck this! Fuck you! Fuck you, Catherine, you lied! And I believed in you, I trusted you! You said we're getting on the fucking ARK!
We are on the ARK, you idiot! I didn't lie! I can't be responsible for your goddamn ignorance!
Fuck! Catherine? Please don't leave me alone. Catherine? Catherine?
No, I fucked up. Sorry, he's doomed. The ending of SOMA is fairly predictable if you're paying attention, which I wasn't the first time through, granted, but it's enough to knock you on your ass, or at least I think so. As I said at the start of this video way back when, this game thrived in the medium it was in. Playing as Simon, you take an ownership of him you'd never see replicated anywhere else. You play as him, and when you switch bodies, you are, when you think about it, an entirely new character. But your ownership of them and your associated personal identity is so immediate that you don't even notice. We're still Simon, right? Actions and decisions are entirely ours, even when they're canonically made by Simon. We care about Simon and try to preserve him and keep him safe, but as soon as we switch bodies, that previous body immediately becomes other. If we were mercy killed in our original body, would we fight? We're the main character, we'd expect to. Suddenly their life has less value to us. I didn't think twice about mercy killing, it seemed the only kind thing to do, but would I want kindness if I was in that seat? It's similar to the Black Mirror episode we discussed earlier, except from an entirely different standpoint. In White Christmas, we follow several characters across the story, and that main character is arguably Trent or Potter, so when we see these cookie stories, the character here is secondary. She only has a few minutes of screen time all in all. I can't even remember what her name is. As a passive observer, we see each character, but our brain does divide it. We see the original, even if she is a bit smug and rude and we don't really like her, and we see the copy, even if we desperately wish we could help her. It's a less intimate experience than SOMA, more like an overview, a passive viewing experience as TV so often is, so there is sympathy, but the empathy is limited. When we play SOMA and we play as those cookies living in those bodies, the sense of identity, original, and copy becomes so much less clear. As soon as you step into the deep sea suit as Simon, the Simon you've played as the entire time immediately becomes secondary in your mind. Immediately. And that's why I think SOMA does this so well. The active experience of SOMA is absolutely crucial to its success. Through this, the game works very well to make you assign value to life. Senseless life in a machine, a simulation simulated brain scan in a VR world, a woman on life support who wants to be free, and then our own life. Which Simon deserved to win the non-existent coin flip? Which Simon deserved to be mercy killed? Which Simon lived the real life? Which Simon has the most value? Which Simon is the real Simon? As my friend Scobie randomly blurted out in a way that felt almost zen, all Simons are of equal value. None of them are the real Simon because there never was one. Our idea of personhood is an arbitrary boundary drawn around a blob of stuff and processes that just moves about. And then he said, "Thanks for coming to my TED talk, but I didn't like that bit, so I didn't include it." Simon sees his life as a series of branching paths, but they're not. They're 4 separate linear lines, only the later lines backfill the memories, stretching backwards in time in some ways. The components within the mechanical Simons allow them to live an entire life before they've even opened their eyes. SOMA portrays transhumanism in an intimate way I've seen no other media portray it. Transhumanism being the social and philosophical movement devoted to promoting the research and development of robust human enhancement technologies, or for short, augmentations, body alterations, the meshing of humanity and technology. We already have these technologies: contact lenses, glasses, prosthetics, and, depending on your outlook, cars and tools. Humans and technology have been intertwined since we first realised hitting rocks with other rocks was more effective than hitting rocks with our hands. Clothes, for example, initially worn for protection and to stop ourselves from freezing to death, still perform those features, but are also a part of our identity. Not wearing clothes is weird and a bad way to show up to a Sunday League football game. Transhumanism is about enhancing our lives with technology to improve general health and extend lifespans. Simon obviously is augmented. He's so augmented that he's arguably more machine than man, but as we play him, we relate to him. He is human to us. His identity in SOMA obviously is our identity. We hear him talk and interact with things seamlessly without giving pause to consider what is actually going on under the surface. Like knowing you have a skeleton inside you all the time, wriggling around, your brain just ignores it. And what makes Simon human? Is it his capacity to think and feel? Is it his memories, his empathy and compassion? Or his ability to look at situations and make an assessment that overrides instinct? Christ knows, I certainly don't. This goes back to the ship of Theseus, an old thought experiment that tackles the concept of identity. If every single component in a ship is replaced with a new component, one at a time, is it the same ship? And is Simon Simon? I think to dwell on things like this too long starts to make my head spin. There's a certain degree of body horror, not necessarily just with Simon, but all the entities he meets down in Pathos-II. Not body horror as in like gore, but body horror as in like switching human parts with metal parts and wiring until they're no longer really human, but they also kind of are. The people you meet are so mechanically altered, usually without their consent, that their brains can't cope and they go into preservation mode. Carl Semken sees his own hands in front of him. Robots speak in human tones and plead for their lives while you unplug them to further your own gains. Amy is trapped down in a shuttle station alone and terrified, forced to breathe and unable to move. In my interpretation, Earth and the Ark seem to be allegories for hell and heaven respectively. Particularly with the biblical name of the Ark, it's hardly subtle to me. The will to live and go on is prevalent throughout this story, and Catherine specifically encourages this at any cost. She takes a flippant attitude towards the robots of Pathos-II, and also heavily implies to Simon that he is a mere extra limb to her, a completely expendable piece of kit she will go on without if she needs to. Like I discussed earlier, I do think the game encourages you to put value on human life in its various forms. A woman who's already dying who asks to go home, a robot with the sentience of a dog, a sentient simulation, a woman who asks to be mercy killed, the WoW potentially, and even ourselves also potentially. The game has you take lives likely without even noticing at first, slowly warming you up until you're making decisions about entities that are powerless, until you stand in front of the body you were in seconds ago and make another. I think the irony of SOMA is that Simon is the facilitator for a heaven he cannot reach. In trying to get the Ark off the ground and into the sky, Simon commits a lot of murder. And it may not seem like murder, I for one feel like the mercy killings are especially okay, but he finds life in a lot of different forms and he extinguishes it for better or worse. Like a ladder of corpses, Simon climbs up and out, or rather, deep down, deep into the earth. Like in Inferno by Dante from Devil May Cry, where the titular Dante has to climb right to the bottom of hell in order to escape, Simon has to climb right to the bottom of this hell to launch the Ark, and thus escape to heaven. Except he's not meant for heaven, and he doesn't make it. That's not to say his path wasn't laid out for him from the beginning. Like I said, he is Deep Sea Simon, so he'll never make it to heaven anyway, and now he's here, down below, in hell. Deep Sea Simon is our Potter, Ark Simon is our Cookie Potter. Cookie Potter Potter was created from the brain of Potter as he was pulled in for questioning after committing a crime. Cookie Potter lived quietly in that cabin, never committing a crime, never doing anything untoward. He is the same person as the man who committed a crime, but he is himself innocent, physically and literally. He is capable of crimes, sure, but he's not committed one. Yet he is the one who sees millions of years of suffering. On the flip side, Omicron Simon and Deep Sea Simon commit murder, and as a result they stay behind to various ends. They are the ones who are punished by the narrative. ARK Simon, born as the rocket launches into space, has never murdered. Although he's a person who could murder and has shown us that he can murder, this Simon is completely physically innocent. I think the concept of living forever, or at least a really, really long time, is fairly appealing to a lot of people. There's nothing more heartbreaking than knowing that the world is millions of years old and we are alive for a blink of that time. The insignificance of our lifespan is devastating to me. There are so many places to go, so many things to enjoy, read, watch and experience that to know I will only ever see a crumb of that is honestly devastating. What will the world be like in 100 years? I mean, besides fried by the climate. But if we do manage to pull through this catastrophic few decades, what will our civilization look like in 100 years? 500 years? 1,000 years? I'd love to see that. But it's a monkey's paw situation, isn't it? What if you had that eternal life you always wanted, or any lifespan you wanted, only to climb out of the rubble one day and find yourself on a ruined Earth, the last sentient creature? Everything destroyed around you, nothing remaining, nothing to do, no purpose. To look around at the bumbling robots, understanding there is a tragic fragment of human life trapped in there, damned to wander around on the ocean floor forever, it really gets to me, I think. Like that little cabin in White Christmas, the man is there and he's been granted tens of thousands of lifespans. In some situations, that would be excitement and opportunity beyond belief, but in a single room for an inconceivable amount of time, trapped and alone, what would that do to you? What do you even imagine that would be like? Simon's hardly so fucked in comparison, I suppose. He could maybe build stuff, maybe make his way back up to the plateau and explore the sea life, maybe tidy up the facility in the wake of the WoW. Maybe there are other undersea facilities that he doesn't know about. Maybe he'd have a little life to live in this facility for a little while, but he might also just go batshit in the silence and lose his mind after 2 years, who knows? Maybe his battery will slowly die, maybe he'll have an accident and break, maybe he'll short circuit, maybe he'll find a kill switch. There is a potential silver lining for Simon. If you take the time to thoroughly explore his apartment in the prologue, you'll find a note warning him about the vivid nightmares he'll have as a result of his accident, brain trauma, and treatment. Of course, the game is talking about the cutscene that happens before the game begins, of the car accident, but maybe, just maybe, it alludes to something wider. Maybe the events of this game never happened. Maybe he's still tucked away in bed, cozy and happy. But let's not get our hopes up. Thanks for watching. I hope you appreciated this unrelenting deep dive, no pun intended, into SOMA. This video felt weird to write. I usually have a point to my videos, be them deconstructing problematic shit, writing as balanced a review as I can bring myself to, or arguing my own interpretation of a game, but this video didn't have a purpose. It felt strange to arrive at the conclusion of this script and not have a wrap-up sentence or a final point to make. I did write this script expecting to have a final argument, but I don't think there is one, at least not for me. SOMA is a game that affected me profoundly, if you couldn't tell. It got me thinking about all sorts of useless shit I probably shouldn't be thinking about, but hopefully I've gotten you thinking and it's freed me from my curse. As a game, it doesn't play well. I mean, it plays a bit shit, all things considered, but as a narrative experience, it's 1 in a million. And this video is my love letter to it. That's all it is, just a love letter and an exhaustive list of all the stuff I liked. You're welcome. If you know any similar games, if you have any similar thoughts to share, or if you'd like to insult me on a personal level, head down to the comment section and let them rip. I read all of the comments and I appreciate the time you take to watch my videos, so I'm happy to hear it. Moreover, like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Patreon if you want to contribute to the channel in exchange for some sweet pledge rewards, and check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/MokeKK if you want to chat games real time, most days 7 PM UK time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.